Hello everyone, welcome to the video. Thanks for clicking. Be great if you could give us a like, share, subscribe, and also give us a comment. We want to get your feedback on these things. Today, it's Sunday. It's the day after the far left and the, as is called in the press, the far right, or although I would say the patriot protests in London. Now, a lot of bias on both sides for this. So what I want to pick up on here is really how the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has dealt with policing and also with social media regarding these demonstrations. And we're going to have a quick look at his social media tweets. And then what we'll do is just have a look at some of the videos maybe, but we'll see how we go. Okay, so here we are on Twitter, Sadiq Khan's homepage, so Mayor of London. So let's just have a look at his pinned tweet here. Anyone planning to join the Black Lives Matter protest over the coming days, for you and your family's safety, please stay at home and find a safe way to make your voice heard. To the extreme far right groups hijacking this crucial cause, Londoners have no time for your hatred. Now, I'm going to call that out straight away. Who is he, an impartial or meant to be impartial Mayor of London, calling out anyone that is opposing the vandalism of statues far right? I think, if anything, people like Antifa have hijacked the Black Lives Matter protests. That's been seen clearly. I don't see this man standing up for any kind of safety with regards to COVID or in any way trying to stop these protests, these Black Lives Matter protests in the past. You know, if he wants to talk about extreme groups hijacking causes, then I think he needs to look very closely at Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and the Marxist socialist agendas behind both of those groups. So let's have a little look further down. The commander of the police has responded to an image of a man appearing to urinate on PC Keith Palmer's memorial. Yep, there's always one idiot in the crowd. Yeah, disgusting. That guy should be nicked, absolutely. Obviously didn't get the memo as to what the protest was about. Sophie Linden, Metropolitans have shown restraint and professionalism in the face of violence and assaults. Thank you. Yeah, you know, there were some scuffles. I don't know how many police officers have been injured yet. That hasn't been published. Quite a few were injured during the peaceful Black Lives Matter protests. So let's see how that goes. One of the things I want to point out here is that even before the counter-protest, you know, against Black Lives Matter came into being, Sadiq Khan was on his, I think he was on LBC or Talk Radio, one of those, saying about the far right, etc., extremists and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, those people had already been labelled as such. So he's now going to go on and say about millions of Londoners have been disgusted and shameful scenes of violence, desecration and racism displayed by the far-right extremists who gather in our city today. In the face of attacks and abuse, our police did a fantastic job to control the situation. Thank you. Now, when he deployed the police this weekend, looking at the counter-protest, the non-Black Lives Matter protest, he immediately deployed riot police. I think they call those guys level 1. And what they did is immediately kettle those protesters. These are two actions that were never used against Black Lives Matter protesters. And even yesterday, these measures were still not used against Black Lives Matter protesters. So, you know, this is a man who says that he wants equality. Well, he wants equality as long as you're, you know, following his Marxist left-wing agenda. So, you know, the police have been told by the Mayor of London to police both groups very differently. Now, I've never been kettled before. I understand it's quite frustrating. It is a tactic used usually on anyone who's not left or even leans slightly towards a conservative or right side. You're immediately labelled a racist and a far right. So if you want to turn up and protest, you're immediately kettled. And to be kettled by riot police, you know, that's going to provoke a reaction. I'm not saying that the reaction was justified. I have seen some video, which I'll show you later in this one, of, you know, people kicking off with the police. But, you know, the emphasis that's put on this for yesterday's protest by the mainstream media and, you know, left-wing politicians far outweighs, you know, the emphasis that was put on it when it was the Black Lives Matter protesters that were basically smashing the place up, running riot, you know, no effective policing, no riot gear, because it was a softly approach. When it's anyone that's slightly right-wing, and I do not mean far right, you know, the police come in and they're told to go heavy-handed. So, you know, that's how things go. Let's have a quick look down here. Okay, Sadiq Khan retweets global newsrooms. Yeah, London Mayor Sadiq Khan has appealed directly to protesters, telling them to please leave now. Now, that's something else that wasn't in place for any of these Black Lives Matter protests. There was no curfew, so he's decided that there's going to be a curfew now because these are people that don't agree with Black Lives Matter. This is to prevent the further violence and the spread of the COVID virus. I mean, can you believe that? What a joke. The COVID virus, absolutely. Let's have one more read of this. So everyone who intended to come to the Black Lives Matter protest today but didn't has reduced the risk of confrontation with these extreme far-right wingers and the spread of COVID-19. First time I've heard him talk about the spread of COVID-19 since any demonstration. You know, what a complete biased piece of dirt, really. So, yeah, here we go. Let's have a look. We've got to see the good and the bad. So there you can see full riot police. You know, these guys are obviously pretty angry. Yeah, there could well be some far right people in this, but you know, there's a guy at the front there now, look, trying to calm things down. But as you can see, the policing tactics are completely different. You know, this is riot police kettling protesters, which is something that really didn't affect them. Now, this guy, I think he spits at the police. That's disgraceful. And then someone has a pop at one of the policemen at the back. Look, scumbag. You know, you've got to call this out on both sides. Another scumbag there. You know, this is not what it's about. And these few people, obviously, are going to be used by the press to mark the whole demonstration as far right and violent. You know, this is what we don't need. We don't need this element in amongst, you know, patriots who are just disgusted about the way that our monuments and stuff have been attacked, and also about how, you know, Black Lives Matter and Antifa have been allowed to run right through the streets. You know, so it takes a few people on the opposite side, you know, to make everyone look bad. But, you know, when the majority, you know, a lot of Black Lives Matter people are throwing stuff at the police and attacking police horses, you know, that's kind of put down as a minority. Whereas here, as you can see on this Twitter feed, it's going to be all the bad stuff, you know, not the good stuff. Now, what I would say is I subscribe to Mayor Tusi, who is a brilliant YouTuber. I'm going to put a link to his channel in the description of this video because he gives a pretty impartial view of it. You know, I followed this guy for a long time, and, you know, the current joke is mayor for mayor. And yeah, I'll tell you what, if this guy did stand for mayor, I would support him. You know, he talks a lot of sense and is pretty unbiased in many of the things that he looks at. Yes, he's conservative, but I would say he's a liberal conservative. You know, I'm going to play a few bits of other videos that I found, though, the good and the bad, on both sides, because, you know, it wasn't only the you know, far right, as the press would have you believe, that were committing acts of violence, and we're going to have a look at some of those as well. So bear with me, please place your comments, share the video, and obviously I would suggest, you know, people like Mayor Tusi, Rotten Politics, and We Got a Problem, as well as ex-Para, ex-Army Paz, great channels. I'm going to put links to all of those channels in this video because these are guys that you should definitely subscribe to. Okay, so I'm going to show you some of the worst that I can find of the alleged far right, and then I'm going to show you a clip of the far left, or Black Lives Matter, etc. Just see what you think, and then we'll see where we go from there. So, as I'm sure you'll agree, there's nothing you can say to condone that. Obviously, I am going to point out that the policing tactic was very different. In one of those first clips that I showed you on Sadiq Khan's site, you see the group of police riot gear walk straight through a crowd of patriot protesters. That's obviously going to antagonise people. We didn't see this kind of thing going on with the Black Lives Matter protests, so I'm going to call out there's a certain amount of provocation there. I'm not condoning the violence that's kicked off because that doesn't help anyone. These are the sort of scenes you're going to probably see on the mainstream media. As you know, these protests were, completely violent, etc. That's the narrative the media are going to portray. I'm going to show you a couple of clips now of, the other side not acting as nicely as they should. So we'll see what happens there. So we don't know what's led up to this situation, but what I can see there is that the guy who eventually gets attacked isn't attacking anyone and really doesn't do a lot until a member of the Black Lives Matter protests, go to throw his hat off of his head, which, that's a personal insult, and he confronts him, to which point he's then jumped from behind, put in a neck lock. Some people are kind of saying that this guy was stabbed in the neck. I don't know at this point in time. But it just goes to show that, one side can provoke the other. However, the other side will then stand up for themselves, face brutal retaliation, and of course they'll be made to look the baddies. And I'm going to call that out and say because they are not members of Black Lives Matter, they are portrayed as the far right and the baddies. So there you go. I mean, on both sides there, those scenes are not what we want to see. I agree with peaceful protest. I agree that the murder of George Floyd was unacceptable. However, I don't agree with repeat protests again, and again, and an increased level of vandalism and Marxism from Black Lives Matter or Bantifa and Antifa, these socialist movements, these Marxist movements that have infiltrated Black Lives Matter for sure and are using them really just to push a political agenda. And you can see that clearly through the Black Lives Matter website and their GoFundMe page. So again, let's see what the mainstream media portray. I haven't looked yet this morning. I'm up quite early. I have no doubt that yesterday's demonstration in the mainstream media is going to be all about the far right, etc., these extremists, and I will be interested to see how many scenes of Black Lives Matter protesters attacking people. Well, you could say on a racial basis, but I bet that won't be portrayed in the press. You'll be lucky if you see those clips. So again, I'm going to put some links to some other great channels that I follow and I support. I'll leave it up to you to make up your own minds, but I think the media bias, the bias of politicians like Sadiq Khan, the Labour Party, David Lammy, Diane Abbott, these people are just race-baiting Marxists. So I'm going to leave it there until the next one.